This is exciting.
Hello. Hi. Good afternoon. And allow me to welcome you to the Teen Q&A with Jordan Casteel. A little bit about our artist. Jordan is originally from Denver, now living in Harlem, New York. She's an oil painter and an assistant professor of painting at Rutgers University. Her exhibition, Returning the Gaze, is opening today, so do yourself a favor and check it out. The work is made up of portraits of strangers who she meets in her community. I should mention Jordan was also a platform artist in 2010. And she worked with Platform's Art Lab interns to create a mural for the Kemp Center called Words Are Power. My name is Anna Leonhardt, and I represent the Art Lab interns at Platform, and I go to Golden High School. Now for the rest of the panelists.
Hi, my name is Anaya Beasley. I go to Denver Discovery Middle School, and I represent Project Voice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bella Okanya. I go to the Denver School of the Arts, and I represent Art Students League of Denver.
Hi, I'm Curtis Dickey. I'm from Manual High School, and I'm here with Project Voice.
Woo! And I'm Jordan.
All right. So my first question is, what is your motivation for the majority of your paintings?
Ooh, my motivation. So much my motivation is rooted in those that I get to know and meet. So it starts with people such as yourself that I have the opportunity to get to know somebody through. It could be something like this where I'm doing an interview. It could be somebody while I'm walking down the street. It's just being an observer. So I'm inspired by all that's around me, and that's what motivates me to make the work that I'm making, is listening to other people, sharing empathy, sharing stories. And yeah, so color, light, and people's stories are what motivate me to kind of keep going.
Yeah. And I hope to see a painting of me.
Yeah, you just wait.
So we were wondering, because you are like this major up-and-coming artist, how do you handle the responsibility and attention from being an artist that's now like massive, such as yourself?
I am still learning how to do that because it is happening in real time as I'm talking to you guys right now. It's little things like my Instagram having many more comments or likes or follows, and I just don't know how to sift through the information. So the things that I'm finding to be important are balance. Like, how do I balance myself and that in which I know to be the most true for myself. So it's who am I becomes really important. And then managing all the expectations of everybody else. So who I am is somebody who likes to take time with people, right? But that gets hard when everybody wants a piece of that time. And so there are more people wanting time, and there are more people that I want to give that time to. But then I have to ask myself, where am I, and am I taking care of myself? So I have to ask, I have best friends in the audience that I have to turn to, my own family, to say, will you be my allies? Will you look out for me? Will you make sure that I'm drinking water, that I'm getting enough sleep, that I'm doing the things that I need to do on my basic needs level? Because nothing can happen if I am not mentally and physically well first. And that's probably true for all of us, right? So as things are becoming more public and people are connecting to me and feeling really a part of this journey, I also just have to stay really grounded in what it is that matters to me most, and maintaining those most intimate relationships. So the people who have known me in the good, bad, and the ugly, and being as honest with people that I have bad days too, and that if I need time and space, just asking for help is how I'm learning. And that's hard for me because also those people in the audience who know me very well, I can be a bit controlling. I like keeping my hand in everything. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so it's hard to let go sometimes, but it's something I'm learning. It's a balance.
Okay. Has there ever been an instance where you've had an unequal experience with being a female artist?
I love that question when I saw it. So what does it mean to be a female artist in a world or in a history that hasn't necessarily made a lot of room for us? I think what I'm fighting up against are systematic microaggressions or things that have already been in place that I have to push up against, that people aren't always cognizant of the things that they're doing to not make room for me or my paintings or my voice. And making people cognizant is the challenge, and doing that with empathy and compassion for their circumstances as well. So if I were to think, it's hard for me to identify a specific instance where somebody was like, you're not welcome here because you're a woman or something. It never feels that explicit, and we probably all can identify with that the things that sometimes hurt us are things that happen, and then we go home and we think about it and say, hey, there wasn't actually room for me where I felt there should have been. And when I'm going back, how do I have conversations with people where I'm educating in a meaningful way, and advocating. So as I move through the world as a woman painter with a name that is gender neutral, where in the beginning phases of my career, people walked into my exhibitions and would be talking to my mom unknowingly perhaps and saying, where is he? And she'd be like, she's over there. You know what I mean? Like, there were assumptions that people were making about who could be in such a position of power, of having large scale paintings of men on a gallery wall. Those were assumptions people made based off their own knowledge of who would be allowed to have access to that space. So then I got to be the pleasant surprise when they turned around and saw a young black woman saying hello, and these are mine. You know what I mean? Yeah.
All right. Is there a moment that inspired you to start returning the gaze?
Yes. So some of you I heard are seniors and probably thinking about college, right? It's a really hard time. But when I was in the position where I was thinking about college, there were a few things that I had in mind. I loved art, right? Like, I knew that I was a creative being in some capacity. I liked using my hands. I liked being engaged with the creative field. But I didn't necessarily know how people get to where I kind of am right now. I didn't know anybody doing that. So I figured if I could write and if I could communicate, I could do anything. And that meant that I needed to go to a liberal arts college. I decided that a liberal arts college would give me the freedom to ultimately make those decisions and give me the skills to be a critical thinker and engager of the world. This is all preface to get to your point, too. So I say that to be a critical thinker and engager in the world means that you have to do your research, right? And as I was preparing to do the Visible Man series in particular, I did a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of reflecting, utilizing those creative thinking skills, and just, critical thinking skills that I got when I was in college at Agnes Scott to really think about what history I was up against. If I was going to portray the black male body, I needed to be knowledgeable about all the portrayals of the black male body in a visual context up until that point, whether it be in media, art history, whatever it is. I wanted to be aware of the demeaning history and the positive history. And I found and also probably knew consciously and subconsciously that black men were up against a history of real villainization, of hypersexualization. And I wanted my subjects to feel powerful wherever they went, because I was also thinking about the fact that once they leave the studio where I can protect them, right? Like, they're like in my safe space. How do they maintain their power? And the gaze was one of those first decisions I made about how the subjects will maintain a sense of power as they move into the world and kind of leap from the bounds of my nest that I had been keeping them in, to give them their own wings so that they can decide for themselves in whatever spaces they are and command attention and respect. So the gaze was the one thing I've ever asked of all the kind of large-scale portraits in my sitters, is saying, hey, just look at me. The rest is up to you. And I'm also thinking about selfishly maintaining and keeping a connection, and a lot comes from looking someone in the eye, which isn't always easy, because I sometimes drift. So, all right, thank you.
Where do you hope to be in the future because of your artwork? Like, what is your goal? Where do you hope your artwork gets you?
Oh, it's so crazy, that question, because if you ask me that question 3 years ago, I would have been like, my dream was to teach at DSA. No, maybe not even 3, like 5 years ago, right? Like, I don't even, but I'm looking at my mom, like, when was it that I was like, how do I get to teaching at DSA? That was my dream, was to have some place that I could be painting happily, right? Maybe there would be a coffee shop that would let me put a painting up or something. And then I could be working with youth such as yourself, that I could be doing education. That was the dream, right? So then this thing happened and I got into Yale, and that happened because people who loved me said, you know, you are worthy of trying for the best. And you should try. Even if you doubt yourself, you should try. Because there's no, even if you fail in some capacity, it's not failure at all, because you gave yourself a chance. And I got into Yale, and then, so things, the goalpost keeps moving. And right now, like, I'm trying to remember to be present. Like, this is a really monumental moment for me. Even sitting here with you guys in this capacity is like a little out of body for me. It's mind-boggling that this is where I get to be today, right here, right now. And my dream is also, if I think in a really critical sense, I'm constantly thinking about how this work lives in history. How do I get a part of a contemporary narrative, which I think is happening right now, but also a historical one, right? How do I get to be a part of a conversation where the legacy of these paintings is in the house and realm of the masters to some extent, that there's real critical engagement with the work. So I think that's my next and kind of like central focus right now, is thinking about the longevity, getting it into museum acquisition. So this is what, you know, the paintings that this museum has bought is really important, because institutions take great care of the work. They're the keepers, and they are the space makers for the work to live a really long life. So I just want more of that, as much of that as possible. It's kind of my goal right now.
So what advice would you give to young artists like us who are kind of trying to maybe develop our careers in art or whatnot?
Oh, I have so much of, you know, I'm a teacher, right? So I'm like, I have students, and I have a lot of young people in my life that I'm talking to all the time, and they would say I'm like hitting them over the head with nuggets constantly. And how do you succinctly put that into a sentence of advice is really hard to do. But there are a few things that I think have been key for me, and mentors is part of that, right? People say that, and it's like, what does that mean? Mentors can come in many different forms, but it's really people who can be your cheerleaders and your guides, who maybe work in the field. So my time at Platform, my time at Dava, my time at East, that there were people at each of those places that I really connected to, that I felt safe to ask questions of. And to ask those questions is a huge part. Also, as a creative, nothing happens without the work. And I say that to my students a lot, that really dedicating your energy to your practice and not being so focused on what people are saying or doing or thinking about your work, or whether or not you've been written about in XYZ article, or if a gallery is coming by, or whatever it is, that your focus should be your work always, because the rest will happen and find you irregardless. But there are great resources. I remember going to Tattered Cover with my mom and like standing in the art section and looking for like books that said Art Now, because I couldn't figure out how to write a contract or how to, so never be afraid to ask questions. Artists to artists, we help each other a lot. You know, I'm still calling other artists who have been in this game a lot longer than I am, and I say, is this normal? What does it mean to have a consignment agreement? What is typical or not typical? We're also of a generation where social media is this thing, you know, like utilizing that. I think you should. It's a pretty cool platform to have, like Instagram right now, because it's a great visual space to kind of show the world what you do, and people can access it literally from around the world in a way that people wouldn't have been able to 10 years ago. So. Yeah, it is like your resume. It also means at a young age, you guys are kind of placed with a lot of responsibility about what you put on the internet, kind of could live forever. So being responsible with that is a hard thing to do. But I know friends who have burner accounts so they can do all the crazy things they wanted. You know what I mean? Create separate spaces and then set a space for your business and think about how you want the world to know you. Somebody asked me just the other day, you know, things look good on Instagram, but how am I really? So make sure you're asking asking each other those questions too, because it's a very performative space, and recognizing that we're promoting ourselves in certain ways, but it doesn't show what's happening behind the curtain. And that goes back to the mental and physical health too.
Okay. What is the key to being able to connect with strangers for such intimate projects?
Oh, what is the key? The key is like a lot of self-talk where I'm like, you got this, 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 you got this. Because I know it probably seems surprising as you guys are sitting here and you guys seem to me like super relaxed, but you may inside be like, I can't believe I'm doing this. How do I ask this question right? You know what I mean? That process of thinking you're having right now is very similar to what I have to do when I approach someone on the street, where I'm like, okay, like, we're gonna go photograph people today. Like, I have to like pump myself up on the days that I'm like gonna photograph, and then when I'm like out in the street, I have my camera, and sometimes I'll walk around the same block like 3 times, seeing people, and then like the 4th time is finally the time I stop and ask. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I'm sussing it out. I'm letting my intuition speak for itself, and whether or not I'm safe approaching someone. You know, there are a lot of things that I'm having to think about and kind of gauge. It's like, okay, this person seems to be inviting, and so I'm going to trust that instinct and approach. But it's hard. It is really hard. And the key for me is knowing that every time I have asked, I have been given a gift of getting to know someone I might not have gotten to know before. And genuinely, most of the time, the thing that I'm most afraid of is like a little irrational, because I'm not giving people the opportunity to be genuine and authentic and nice. I'm going into those conversations in a place of fear rather than a place of generosity and grace. So it's like I have to remind myself how I approach the space that I want. How I approach them is how they'll genuinely reflect back. I think people generally reflect what you give them.
Yeah.
So I just have to like get in the mindset of reflecting just sincerity and openness and whatever, which is hard because I get my energy by myself generally.
That's so interesting because you make it look so easy to walk up the street. You do. You're just like, hey, let me take your picture. I was wondering, do you agree with the statement, the youth is the future? Do you see that in your students?
Okay, I want to ask that question. I'm like, do you guys feel like that? But so yes, in some ways, absolutely. I'm also only 29. Like, I know that feels old, but I like don't feel that old, but not really. Like, I'm like, to you guys, maybe that feels old, but like not. I don't know. It's weird because I don't feel so far from you in a lot of ways, if that makes sense. So when we're thinking about like the youth as being the future, when I looked at your questions, I think there are real evidences that, yeah, like I read your questions and was like, dang right, they're the future, because literally you guys were thinking and asking questions that I haven't been asked before, which means the adults are doing something different than you. And something is in that, you know what I mean? Like there's something in the way that you are making connections about identity and how you exist in the world and how you as an individual exist, and then your sense of empathy and recognizing me as an empathetic and whole human being was really present in your questions. So that gives me hope, and in that sense, yes, I hope you're the future, but that's also a lot of pressure. Like as I'm looking at you, like I bet you feel a lot when people are like the youth is the future, because you're like, oh man, like what does that mean for me? Like I gotta save the world? Like it's falling apart right now. Like I don't know what to do. So like thinking about, all of that is probably true, and you have to decide for yourself. I remember, for example, in my life, like marching or going to physical marches is hard for me, right? I have some health things that make it more challenging for my physical body to be out in the world for long periods of time in that way. But showing up, there's a difference between symbols and substance, and the way you do the work, whatever that future work is, might look different for each of you. And giving yourself room to process the world around you and think about how you contribute to that is totally up to you. It's going to be fabulous, whatever it is, and just right. So never feel like you're not doing enough, because my guess is you're doing quite a lot.
Yeah. At what age did you start working on art? what caused your spark?
Okay, so you know what's crazy? We had the community opening was last night, right? And this woman comes up to me at the community opening with this like page from a scrapbook she had kept when my parents went to there's this place called the Ranch. We used to go to the mountains every year for Thanksgiving, and my mother would invite Peace Corps members to spend Thanksgiving with us, and she would write these letters to these people saying like, this is what you should expect, and this is what my children are like. And so this woman showed me the letter my mom gave to her, and it was at 5.5 years old, right? My mom's like little note is Jordan. Well, first of all, she said Jordan is a princess, which I was like, really? Like, I don't feel that way now, but maybe she thinks she's a princess, something like that. And then it was like, and she loves rainbows and color and making and projects. Those were the adjectives, the things she described of me at 5.5 years old. So I think it's like really something that has been innately a part of my being. And that's probably true for you guys if you're creatives. There are things that we do as adults that when we look back, we're like, and really, I've done aspects of this my whole life, you know? Whether it's being a leader, that maybe you were as a kid collecting your friends and getting them all to do the same project together and kind of mediating between them. And then next thing you know, you're off to be president. And for me, it was like I was always sitting in a corner. I was happy in a corner with like a box of crayons and maybe some popsicle sticks. So it started very young, very, very young. But as a painter itself, I just found a medium. One day I played enough with enough things that I stumbled upon oil paint, and I was like, ooh, this is nice. I could keep doing this. And that was in college. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, oil paint is a struggle for me.
Well, the fact you've already gotten your hands on it is a good thing. You stick to, you know?
This is very true. This is very true.
Remember, I didn't come to that game until I was 20, 21.
Exactly. So on a less serious note, what is your go-to playlist when you're painting?
Okay. Let me think. There are a few things. I don't actually listen to music when I'm painting, so that's a little, like, I'm going to give you an answer to what playlist I listen to when I'm on the train, okay, because that's probably more music related, which is a very random hodgepodge of, like, old R&B, a lot of love music kind of thing, like, I don't know, Anita Baker and Trey Songs and like, you know, like it's like crazy old Aaliyah, you know? So like that's the thing that's like playing on my iPad or not iPod, what is it? My cell phone. We don't have iPods anymore. I did just age myself. My cell phone. I am turning 30 in a few weeks. It just hit. And then when I'm in the studio, oftentimes music is too directive of a mood for me, quite frankly. So I tend to listen to podcasts or audiobooks, and that becomes the way for me to, I don't know, focus. I get to listen to a story and then zone out. Rather than like, I'm not like as into like dancing or like singing the song. I'm just like listening.
As a follow-up question, I know in your Vogue interview that you were like, yeah, I listen to crime podcasts. I was wondering if that ties into the work at all.
Ooh, that could be deep. I don't think so. You know? We're like looking up. I don't think so. Like, maybe I need to look at this. That's a good question. Now I'm gonna look at the paintings. Like, maybe what's crazy is sometimes I look at the paintings and I do remember what I was thinking or listening to. So, like in that sense, I personally maybe like am influenced by that moment of listening to something. But I don't think I'm specifically like. No. Yeah, no. It's just I just love a good mystery.
Who doesn't?
Or crime. Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of like sick, maybe. I'm like.
How did you jumpstart your career?
You know, how this has come to be is still a little baffling to me personally. Like how the chips have fallen into place or the puzzle has literally found its way together. There have been a lot of pieces that have been in my orbit for a long time, but I think there are a few things. A lot had to do with the way that I function in the world as a learner. Right? Like, I genuinely consider myself a learner. So when I was dropped at Yale University, that's how I felt. Like, I kind of got thrusted at Yale as a person who had never stretched a canvas before, had never really, I was like hanging out in Meiningers over here and buying pre-stretched canvases, and that's about as far as I went. And I remember Wade, who's sitting right here. Hi, Wade. He hung my paintings for my Yale interview, and he was like, "Heads up, like if you get in, you're gonna have to learn how to stretch a canvas." And I was like, "Okay, you're right. Okay, you know." But it meant that I didn't know what I was doing, and I felt that pressure, but I had to be willing to learn, and I wasn't afraid to learn. And genuinely, as my career continues to move, like, I think the learner aspect is a huge part of what has allowed those puzzle pieces to come together, because I have to ask questions of the people who know the key to that mystery before I do. But I'm not sure how this has happened, quite frankly. Yeah, I think there are a lot of things. I also am a hard worker. I remember also having conversations with Wade in grad school where he'd be like, "Jordan, you finished your paintings for your crit like last week. Like, why are you still cranking out so many paintings?" And I was like, "I gotta catch up." I'm like, I feel like I have missed time compared to my classmates because they've been doing this longer than me. Like, I need to make a lot more bad paintings than everyone else to like figure out how to make a good painting. You know what I mean? I had this mentality that I knew that I had to fail quite a lot, and the failures ultimately just teach me to stand up again, and that resilience has been a huge part of my ability to stand here today. Is that I know that for I have gotten rejection letters, guys, like legitimately quite a few, and I have been told no. And I think somebody sent an email to my mom recently and was like, "Oh, I made a mistake when I saw her work forever ago and didn't follow up on that." And I'm like, "Yeah, you made, oops, whatever, you know." Oops. But there was somebody who believed in me, and I believed in myself first. You know what I mean? So just keep believing in yourself. And I can't say I am always perfect at that, but I'm always wanting to be better and learn more. So I think that's a huge part of how I've been able to kind of continue forward somehow.
All right, so when I was upstairs looking at your artwork, I was reading the little biography.
Yeah, like the little narrative.
Yeah,
Were they
like
the blue ones?
Yeah,
the sitter narrative.
It said, and then I was going upstairs. I only saw one painting of a female who was not African American. Her name was Fatima.
Yes.
But my question is like, why black men?
Why black men, or just brown bodies,
Yeah, in
right?
general, yeah.
So that was another thing where me going to liberal arts college and like studying and being a critical thinker of the world, I was thinking about what I had seen historically in art museums, and it wasn't a whole lot of myself contemporarily as a brown person, as a black woman. I didn't see a lot of my brothers, sisters, friends, cousins, whatever. I didn't felt like there was a lot of representation of me in contemporary space. And as a result, I figured I wanted to be a part of changing that narrative and creating portraits of people that there's clearly a backlog. We need it, like there's a lot of room to fill. So there's enough portraits of everybody else as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know. I always in grad school, I remember being asked that. It was like, why aren't you painting white people? Like that, I think that was a question. And I was like, you guys never asked that of the white people, why they won't stop painting themselves. So like, why are we just asking me that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why it has to be a question for me. So yeah, like no one asked that of Matisse or any of those guys. So like, here I am.
This kind of adds on to, I think, his question is, given all of the kind of crazy things going on in this world, how do you view your paintings?
In the sense of like, how do I view them in relation to the world right now? I view them personally as a space of respite. So I feel a sense of pause when I'm making them. Like it's a very meditative process making these paintings. And when I look at them, I feel some of that. Like I feel like I'm given an opportunity to slow down and see and just be present. And my hope in a lot of sense is that this does that for other people, that this is an opportunity for people to, yes, see people they haven't maybe seen a lot of before, like in the literal sense, but also to get lost in color and line and texture and relationships, and then be surprised, have hidden language that maybe the first time you looked you didn't notice, and then the second time you see it, and a sense of discovery and rediscovery is the thing that I hope that people that this work holds in this time where we really are in a place of need, where we're swiping through. I'm so flooded, you guys. Like, I know you must be too. I think everyone in this room in some ways is like flooded by the news and the excess of information. And I feel very free in this space, and I hope that other people can feel that when they're amongst the paintings as well, that it provides a moment of pause. The beauty of the museum, what was different for me is seeing work in a museum. This is a first for me to have this much work in this context, right? And there's something about the way that museums sound and feel that is unlike a gallery or any place else the paintings have existed. But I feel like all my friends are like in sanctuary, like they're on vacation together, like relaxing, you know? Like, I just want people to feel that when they walk into that space too.
Okay. Who are some of your greatest inspirations, artists or otherwise?
There's so many. I'm inspired by you guys right now. Like seriously, you guys should feel so proud doing this and your preparation for this. I mean that. Like, there are moments, my inspiration 9 times out of 10 comes from people such as yourselves and my students. I am listening to their journeys and talking to them in the classroom, and really in awe of their determination to follow their passion and their dreams and to fight against things that are obstacles that life will continue to present, but their grit and their determination is really inspiring to me. So my students probably are on the front of my mind, also because a lot of them emailed me last night because they couldn't get their assignment online and they were like panicking. So they're like front of my brain. I'm like, I'll take care. If they're watching, it's like, I'll take care of you. I promise I'm coming back. But then there are people such as my parents and my friends. James, Yvonne, the people that I've met. The everyday person inspires me more than anybody else. And then just like artists, there's so many. Lynette Yodomboiki, there's a lot of like Black women portraitists right now that are just giving me so much life. And what's beautiful is we're in a community together. I genuinely feel like we're so supportive of one another, and we're using our own experiences in our own hands to tell stories that others might see as being very similar, but we also see the differences between them and the power of those differences, that none of this forward movement wouldn't happen without all of us coming together with the things and the stories that we have as individuals and then pushing a greater narrative. So Lynette Yodomboiki, Shabalala Self went to Yale with me. I could just name forever. There are a lot. But a lot of people in this room are probably where I'd start.
So, Anna, we have one more question from you, and then we're going to open up for one or two from the audience. So if you want to go ahead and ask the last question for today.
Yeah. Is there any advice that you would give to high schoolers who are afraid to enter art school?
I was afraid too, and I didn't go. So that's not... Truly, I was afraid of art school. I think what's hard about pursuing a career in the arts is it feels very abstract the entire time you're pursuing it. Like, there's never really a way that makes sense. There's no A plus B gives you C and C equals success. You know what I mean? And your own vision of what that success is can only be determined by you, yourself, and I. It's such an internal journey that you have to decide first thing as you're thinking about art school, like what is your intention for yourself? Like what are you hoping to gain? If it is about being super visible in the world and being like artist as celebrity is like a very new thing, I think. And what does that mean? Is that what you want? Is it the ability to, just like I wanted, to be able to paint and sustain myself as a functioning adult and have a job? So teaching is, I'm a very, like I said, practical person. So like teaching has always been a huge part of the puzzle for me, is like knowing that there would be financial security and that I could engage with the youth was going to be a huge part of me making a decision about where I was going to go. And art school has been hugely important for a lot of people. If I think back at Yale, and I probably was pat on the head quite a lot, theoretically maybe, and like literally, where I was like, oh, baby Jordan, I was the non-threat, right? Coming to that program, they're like, she doesn't know anything. She's cute, you know? Like, I was like, she keeps asking questions, we'll answer them. But less did they know that me asking all those questions was ultimately gonna create room for me to move forward without the burden of expectation that a lot of them had come into grad school with, right? Like, they had gone to art school for so long that they were almost fighting against the thing that they had learned, like the perfection that they had kind of become so attuned to, whereas I was never fighting against that. I felt unencumbered, is that the right word? I didn't feel at all tied to an expectation. But it's a very individual journey. And I also, if you can afford or have the opportunity to visit schools, I think it's important to do that. That was a huge part of my decision making. Like, I went to New York and was like, I need a campus. Like, I felt that immediately. I was like, I can't do New York. I wasn't ready for New York. I couldn't have done that in college. But yeah, that's not a direct answer, but.
That was perfect.
Okay, good. Thanks for making me feel good, even if it wasn't.
You're welcome.
So we have about 9 minutes left, so maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
So a lot of times with like online comics or other artists, I definitely see. Usually, you can kind of see where they've started and where they are right now in terms of the progression of their skill. But with your art, I usually, like, what I'm seeing is it's very consistent. And how do you achieve that?
Hold on, can I have a follow-up question to your question? What do you think is consistent? What do you see as consistent?
The color patterns are usually, they're, sometimes they're abstract and sometimes they're a little bit different. Like here,
Yeah.
it's you with all of your art. It's not just your style. You can tell that it's made by a single person, and it's all very, very well tied together, even if it's not a series.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I mean.
I think that kind of my answer might be tied to the answer I was sort of just giving, in that what has ultimately allowed the work to be the most consistent is that I wasn't inundated with a lot of expectation about what was good or bad drawing or what good or bad painting. I didn't get a lot of technical training, which I don't necessarily suggest that all of you don't try to become technically trained. But I do think the thing that has been consistent is there has been a sense of freedom in the way that I have explored color or gesture or my hand, and that freedom has been so true to me. I've never had to go away from it and then have to come back, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of makers and creatives and contemporary artists had to kind of train. And I'm looking at Wade because you're the only person I've known who went to art school your whole life and then went to Yale. And I'd be curious if you would agree with that or not. Maybe nod or not. Do you?
In regards to drawing or being technically
Yeah.
trained?
Yeah.
I feel that for you, I can see a change in her work. One second. Hi. I'm Wade. I can see a definite change in her work because I've known her since the journey kind of began. But it is pretty consistent from what you're saying. But Jordan's actually, it's just the way she works. She has a process that she follows for all of her paintings, which leads to it being a certain way, having a certain consistency. But technically, she's gotten pretty good. Pretty good.
He's also my worst critic. Let me take that back. I love Wade with all my heart, but he's also the one who would come from my life. Keep those friends around too. I'm gonna make him tell me that in private. That's going. I love you, Wade. Thank you. So yeah, I guess that's a good answer you get.
Do we have another question? Jody, do you want to find someone on your side this time?
Can you put this mic on? I don't think
This is working. Hello? Okay, here we go.
Why did you choose the colors you chose for the paintings?
How did I choose and why did I choose the colors that I chose for the paintings? Every painting starts in a similar place of like having no idea, right? Like I take the photographs of my subjects and I bring those photographs back to the studio. And when I'm photographing someone, I ask them to look at me, but it's true that I don't ask them what color they want to be, per se. Like, that's not necessarily part of my process. Like, what colors do you want to be in this painting? That becomes a very personal process when I'm in the studio. And I use these things called color aids, which are similar to, like, paint chips, which you can buy color aids, which are sort of expensive. I had to buy them for grad school, which is why I ended up using them. But you can do it for free by just collecting all the paint chips in your local, hardware store. Whatever. And I lay them all on the floor, and then I just like start picking up colors, and I'm dropping them down, and I'm moving to a place where something just feels right. Eventually I pick something up, and it just feels like a good start. I almost always start with the color of the person's skin or the color. So I'm thinking about the value range I'm going to need within that person's skin. So I'm thinking about what's going to be my dark and what's going to be my light, and then what's going to be the ground, like the central color of that figure. And then the rest kind of builds around it. So when each painting happens, there's usually also the underpainting, like the first color I choose is what becomes the wash on the background of the painting. So like in that one, it was the green, which you can kind of see on where he's sitting. Like that's the original ground of the painting. And that becomes the light source. Like I think of that as being the guide for the rest of it, if that makes sense.
So we have time for one more. I saw a hand in the middle here. Do you mind? You don't need that? Okay.
So with all the distractions of the world, like getting rejected as you were like applying to like stuff and stuff, how did you keep yourself motivated? Like what specifically made you keep going? Like telling yourself like I can do this. Like what was the...
And Jordan, can you repeat a little bit?
Yeah, so when I got rejected, because it happened, what was it that kept me motivated? For all of the no's, how was I still determined enough to like seek out a yes? And I think a lot of it had to do with the people I surrounded myself by first and foremost, because we all probably have self-talk that isn't like telling us we're the best person in the world, like, or we deserve everything or whatever. But we're reminded by those who love us and what that family, chosen or otherwise, looks like. Those are the people that kind of kept me motivated when I was the most unsure if I should keep going. So I think it's hard. It's hard. They're every day, even this morning or last night, waking up and saying, can I do this one more time? I ask myself questions if I deserve this, even if 20,000 people are telling me that I do. That's the part that you have to continue to remind yourself and have people who love you to remind you that you're worthy of that yes, and continuing to seek it is important. And the yes that comes will usually be the right one. And if it's not, like, I remember the first time I quit a job, and I thought me saying no was going to be the hardest thing I'd ever done. Sometimes we spend our whole lives like expecting other people to determine our lives for us, and then we forget that we also have our own agency, that we have the power to choose our lives for ourselves and change the circumstances that we're in. And usually those are the times that are the most meaningful in my life, or when I have decided that something wasn't working for me and I had to activate what was going to be working, like what I needed, and had to go back and say, okay, what needs to change?
Yeah. Will you all join us in thanking Jordan and the team panelists?
And thank these guys. This is not, thank you guys. Seriously.
And if you haven't seen the show yet, if you arrived and came straight down here, please spend some time, go upstairs. The whole museum is open today, but please make sure to go into Jordan's exhibition and see the work in person. And thank you all for coming and participating in this. Thank you guys.
Thank
again.
you. Thank you, guys.